Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome back to this channel on narcissism. Today, we're gonna take on a question from one of our community members. So let's go to our community and see what the question is. This question comes from someone who says, I want to understand why playing the victim works. I was raised by my grandparents because my parents were emotionally and physically abusive. My grandparents always played the victim. They said they were powerless to change my parents' behavior or control my upbringing since they had to listen to them. As a result, I have many insecurities and trust issues with people, especially those in authority. How did they believe that playing the victim would help us? They said that it is better to be a victim than a perpetrator because being a perpetrator means that you re-hurting others. Well, thank you for your question. It's an excellent question. Actually, I think your question is really two questions. One is why does playing the victim work? And the other is how does playing the victim actually hurt people? That's a very interesting question. And both of them are really good ones. I'm going to take them on separately and then kind of bring it together at the end. So the first part, why does playing the victim work? Well, there are lots of reasons. The easiest way to play the victim is when you feel like you don't have any control. It's easy to say, I'm not in control. Therefore, I am a victim. And it is true that sometimes people don't have any control over the circumstances of their life. You didn't have any control over the fact that your parents were abusive. You didn't have any control over the fact that your grandparents had to listen to those parents. But what people who play the victim do is they make being a victim their identity so that they don't have to take any responsibility for themselves. In other words, if they define themselves as victims, then whatever happens to them must happen to them because they are victims. So they relinquish all personal responsibility. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, they say, I'm a victim who makes mistakes. It's a very different thing. One of the reasons why playing the victim works is because most people lack empathy. Most people lack the ability to put themselves in another person's shoes. And therefore, when someone plays the victim, most people respond to them with pity. When someone else tells you that they are a victim, you immediately start feeling sorry for them, and you may naturally start blaming other people or circumstances for their victimhood. For example, you might think, oh, well, she doesn't know any better because she's a victim. She grew up in a broken home. You may even say to yourself, well, she was abused as a child. Of course, she's a victim. What else could she be? People who are good at playing the victim are the ones who make themselves out to be helpless victims. And there's a certain heartstring that we all have inside of us that pulls when we hear, woe is me, poor little me, I can't control myself. And the more helpless the person seems, the more people will blame others for that helplessness. So if someone says, I'm a victim because I can't control my anger, you might think, poor thing, no wonder they're a victim. They can't control their anger. It's not their fault. No wonder they lash out. You may even say, bless their heart, I hope they get some help. Playing the victim allows the person to avoid accountability and responsibility. As long as they are victims, they cannot be held accountable. They can just keep blaming others. And people who don't have much empathy will naturally take on that message. The second part of your question has to do with how playing the victim hurts people. Well, there are a number of ways that playing the victim can hurt people. One of them is that when the person playing the victim talks about how they were such a victim, they can evoke our empathy, but they can also arouse our irritation. We might start thinking, oh, here we go again. Here's the poor me song again. And the more we hear it, the less empathetic we might become. We might even become annoyed and angry. So it's almost like a self-limiting strategy because the more they play the victim, the less people will actually feel sorry for them. Another reason why playing the victim can hurt people is that it often goes along with entitlement. Usually people who play the victim also believe that they're entitled to something. They're entitled to special treatment. They're entitled to not having to work as hard. They're entitled to not having to behave like other people. They're entitled to special consideration. And that entitlement can rub people the wrong way. Playing the victim can also be hurtful to other people because it often goes along with a lack of accountability. If you're always playing the victim, you never have to admit that you're wrong. You can never apologize because you are the victim. So you don't have to repair the harm that you've caused other people. And that can be very frustrating to the people who are around you. People who play the victim also tend to be very defensive. Because they are the victim, everything that other people do is seen through the lens of victimhood. So anything anyone else does can be interpreted as an attack on them, the victim. And as a result, they may always be responding in a reactive way. They may be very quick to blame other people. They may be very quick to point the finger at somebody else. And that sort of defensive style of relating to people can be very frustrating. And finally, playing the victim can be hurtful to other people because it denies the other people's reality. If you are the victim, then everything is always about you. Other people's experiences are irrelevant. Other people's feelings are irrelevant. Other people's needs are irrelevant. It's always about you, the victim. And that can be very alienating and invalidating to other people. Now, in your particular situation, you asked this question because you grew up with these grandparents who always played the victim. You said that you have many insecurities and trust issues because of the way that they parented you. Now, I'm sure your grandparents weren't trying to parent you in a bad way. I'm sure they felt that they were doing the best they could. But being around a grandparent who always plays the victim sends the message that nothing you do is ever enough, that you can never make them happy, that they're always suffering, and that life is really hard and unfair. And as a result, you may feel like you're never going to be happy either. You may learn to expect misery, and you may learn to accept misery. You may feel like you deserve the misery, and that is very corrosive to children. It makes it very hard to grow up with confidence. It makes it very hard to develop a positive sense of self. And it also makes it very hard to develop a positive sense of the possibilities in the future. Now, in terms of your question about whether playing the victim is worse than being a perpetrator, the answer is yes, it is worse. And the reason is worse is because being a perpetrator means that you are able to take responsibility for what you've done. And in taking responsibility, you can make amends and hopefully repair the harm that you've caused. But people who always play the victim can never make amends because they never admit that they were wrong. Being a victim is certainly worse than being a perpetrator, but it is not an excuse. Being abused is not an excuse for abusing other people. Being mistreated is not an excuse for mistreating other people. Having your rights violated is not an excuse for violating other people's rights. Nobody is perfect and everybody makes mistakes, but nobody should make a habit of it. So the next time you hear someone playing the victim, pay attention to how it affects you. Do you find yourself feeling sorry for them? Do you find yourself wanting to help them? Do you find yourself wanting to fix things for them? Or do you find yourself getting irritated and annoyed? Do you find yourself starting to feel like, oh, here we go again? Let me know in the comments what you find yourself feeling when you hear someone playing the victim, and I hope that helps. Thanks again.